Hello, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. How are you? Welcome back to the channel. I'm going to talk about the spring offensives. They're going to kick off in Ukraine quite shortly. So we live in interesting times, unfortunately. I wish for the Ukrainians and indeed the world economy it was rather less interesting. Um, because obviously Ukraine's received offers of something like 100 Western tanks, those Challenger 2s, the Leopard 2s, which are German manufactured. You notice my Germanic pronunciation. So Germany's promised to donate some. Poland. Who else is giving them? Sweden. I can't remember the Netherlands. Because remember, there are over 2,500 Leopard 2s in the world. Germany's got something like 550 between those that are operational, those that are in storage. So almost all the Leopard 2s are in European NATO countries. So that a lot can be donated. And the great thing is, obviously, you train the Ukrainians on one sort of tank, they know what it is. And the technicians don't have to learn multiple different models of tank to repair. Okay, they're going to be the British-made Challenger 2s and the American Abrams tanks, but only something like 36 of those Abrams tanks. So the Challenger 2s apparently won't take them very long. But the spring offensives will probably be in early March. Now, remember, Russia kicked off this war on the 24th of February last year, which was actually really poor timing because, of course, that's the muddy season. The Russians even have a special word for it, which just shows you how impatient and imbecilic Putin was. Had he done it a couple of months earlier, the ground would have been fairly hard, and there's not been very much movement in midwinter, but it's doable from that point of view. And yes, it's more of a hardship to be outside in the cold. It's more dangerous from that point of view. But when you get into March, oh great, it's not that cold, but it's muddy and it's more difficult for the vehicles and even the people to move. It shows you how irrational he was. And indeed, he could have used the oil and gas weapon even more in midwinter, saying we're going to cut you off completely, Western Europe, from oil and gas, which would have worked. But by the end of February, when there's only about a month of cold weather to go, that wasn't as effective. So show you how he miscalculated this, how this is emotionally and not rationally driven. I mean, even if you forget about morality. But so I think they're not going to learn from their mistake, and Putin will probably repeat his mistake and actually try an offensive before the ground has dried out, before it's going to work that well. And obviously, their offensive wasn't a complete flop, Russia. They took about another 10% of Ukraine at that time. They got to the edges of Kiev. Okay, then they retreated, but they did take a bit of eastern Ukraine. They did take more of southern Ukraine. That was successful. The breakout from Crimea and getting as far as Kherson. But the other reason that they'll do that again is because he might think, in a way, time is not on his side. He was previously thinking if he could just string this out, that the Western will is weak, it will eventually flag. Governments will be elected to office who'll be willing to leave the Ukrainians in the lurch, and these pampered Westerners will get fed up of paying the price to fund the Ukrainians, of arming the Ukrainians. They'll get scared of the risk of nuclear war. They'll be sick and tired of paying high oil and gas prices, of the increased inflation or whatever, food prices, all the rest of it. But that doesn't appear to be working, though it is fraying. Yes, there are some people in the USA, elsewhere, saying, oh, this is too expensive, we shouldn't be funding this, should we spend more on this and that? But it's not as worked as well as he hoped. Another reason why, actually, in a way, time is not on his side is because this equipment is going to arrive. If he attacks now, all those Western tanks haven't got there. Now, so that the Leopard 2s, they can rush through the training in 2 months. Reading about the Challenger 2s, the British tanks. And after you've been through your basic training, if you want to be a tank soldier, it takes like 20 weeks. But as these Ukrainian soldiers are already tank soldiers, it could be less, maybe 10 weeks. And if you're going to do an 80-hour week, work 16 hours a day, do weekends as well. Maybe you could do it in 5 weeks, which would be just about time for early March. Now, the Americans, the Abrams ones, there's to take up to a year, and the Americans don't seem to be willing to really rush it. Also, the Americans are maybe just not thinking about this war, but even beyond that. If Ukraine wins or there's some sort of stalemate, let's think about Ukrainian security for the longer term. And the only way to achieve that is give them an arsenal that's really going to scare off Russia. So these Western tanks, they outclass their Russian analogs in almost every regard. And then there's the Armata Russian tank, which has not really proved itself. The Russians, they were hailing the Terminator tank, which they designed because of the Chechnya conflict in the 1990s. as in it can fire very high. It's like if you're in a narrow street and there's someone building right up there firing down on you, so you can fire at this sort of angle. It's got lots of different weapon systems on it. But they were saying, we're bringing that one in now. That'll really scare you this summer. But we haven't heard any more crowing about that. So clearly it wasn't very effective. So that's why Putin might think we'll better hurry up and try and win now before the Ukrainians get all this stuff, and they might get more and more. So I'm very proud that the United Kingdom start off this chain reaction. The United Kingdom was the first, and then Germany, the United States, and several other countries have pledged, and maybe more and more will. But the idea of giving a peace a chance, well, we did give peace a chance. And, Macron and others and Olaf Scholz were saying we mustn't belittle Russia. We must be able to give them something. They didn't actually say we give them some of Ukrainian land, but let's settle. Let's allow Putin a face-saving way to back down. But he's not taking it. All right, then. The only way we're going to get peace is if Russia is defeated. And that means arming Ukraine. I know the Kremlin saying, oh, this is escalatory. Well, no, it's not actually. I mean, you can't get more escalated in a conventional conflict that's already killed hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, honestly, the estimate is about 30,000 Russian troops, perhaps a similar number of Ukrainian troops and Ukrainian civilians. It'd be over 30,000 by many. It's coming up for 100,000. And so what's the other point? I mean, Russia's really just used everything except biological and chemical weapons, may yet do that. Broken, it's just all these wars of law. There's been no jus ad bello, jus in bellum, and so on. Threatened nuclear war multiple times. Now, a bit of this rhetoric has come out again, which obviously smacks of desperation. I can't remember who it is in the Federal Council was saying about it the other day. Was it Vyacheslav Volodin? So, of course, if we gave Ukraine water pistols, Russia would say it's escalatory. Anything is escalatory except what they do, to try and frighten Western countries off. But they haven't realized actually it doesn't work. So they might try a different tack. I'm obviously very glad they haven't used chemical, nuclear, or biological weapons. But if it's really desperate, will they do that? They might do that. Why they haven't so far is they've obviously been convinced that would be more disadvantageous than advantageous to them. I think China and India will be hacked off about that. Will they buy less oil and gas? Would they vote against it with the United Nations? Would there be sanctions from them? Some of their, countries which are at least neutral, like China, India, like several African countries, Latin American countries, even that might be too much for them. They'll be horrified. Russia's been forced to get a tank back that it gave to Vietnam, who passed it on to Laos, a 1994 manufacture. We're told that Russia's got 12,000 tanks, several thousand of which are in storage, but I bet they lie about that as they lie about everything. We know they're dreadful at vehicle maintenance. So some of those just won't be in a usable condition. They're running low on munitions, and so some of their munitions ought to be less reliable. However, they are really ramping up production, and the Ukrainians have not been able to destroy these military manufacturing factories deep inside Russia. So the Ukrainians try their spring offensive, well, they might try and retake some land, but the thing is they've got to get these new weapons, train them, and be ready to go, and that's not going to happen till late March, I would think. But that's going to be all battles. And I suppose we're just not giving enough, really. The Ukrainians said they wanted 300 Western tanks, and they're getting about 100. Now, the Ukrainians might be asking for more than they think they need. They might actually think they really need 200. But if they ask for 200, they get less than that. You got to say 300, and you'll get a bit less, and that might be enough you could manage. So, I mean, I think 100 probably still not enough. So you've got to see this Western countries' investment in our security, because we know that Putin would not stop at Ukraine. If he gets away with this, this is the first of many conquests. They've already claimed the whole of Ukraine in an official communique at the beginning of the war. They claimed Belarus. They've illegally occupied some of Moldova and Georgia for decades. Some Russian politicians were openly talking about taking back Alaska. Volodymyr Zhirinovsky was doing that. Some talking about taking back the whole of the former Soviet Union, particularly said take back northern Kazakhstan. That, the Kazakhstan has got no history of statehood, said Putin. Some other pro-Putin politicians said that Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia's independence is illegal, and on and on and on. So this is just madcap hyper-aggression without a penumbral argument in its defense. There really is no justificatory argument for this bloodlust and these conquests, and this is imperialism with really no redeeming features. Right. Thank you so much for watching my video. Goodbye.